I was asked this question the other day. Did I believe the construction industry in the UK will ever change? The answer to that is I don't think it will. I just can't see it. I just think the problems that the industry has got are absolutely enormous. We've got all sorts of groups of people talking about collaboration, report after report after report, and we're not really getting down to the nuts and bolts ways of finding solutions to the problem.
Hello everybody, Gavin Coyle here. I'm the Gaffer, the next episode, and I've got a great guest with us today. His name is Len Bunton, and Len is also known as the Rhino. So I need to know, and you need to know, why is he called the Rhino?
Well, Gavin, thank you very much for inviting me on this. This nickname apparently leaked some time ago, Rhino, because I've got a very thick skin and I charge a lot. And that's my introductory message to most of my clients.
Well, Len, I've been looking at your profile over the last couple of weeks, and it's a very impressive profile indeed in terms of, you know, you've been across the world on major projects, challenging projects, and you know, just give us some sort of a sense of Len Bunton, the professional. Like, talk to me through your career. Like, it's an amazing profile.
Can I mention this? I had a look at the dictionary today, definition of the gaffer.
Yeah.
An old man. You'll find the same old distinguished looking gaffers at any awards dinner, which is why I don't go to any awards dinners these days.
I don't get invited there. I don't get invited anyway, Len. So like we're in the same camp on that one. And to be honest with you, I can be doing better things, personally speaking. But yeah, like I see Kuwait, I see Germany, I see Switzerland, I see all these different countries. But like, what exactly were you doing, Len? Like, what exactly is Len the professional?
Well, perhaps just to kick off by saying, and I mentioned this to you earlier in the week, that my career has been like a football game. The first half was spent nearly 30 years involved in running a consultancy business in the United Kingdom. And during that period, I also got involved in some construction disputes. And then after a period of time, my wife said to me, look, you're away from home a lot, the family are growing up. I think you should chuck all this globe-trotting and start up your own business. And I set up my own consultancy business specializing in dispute resolution, not confrontational stuff, but I mean, I've really built my career as someone that wants to get in about issues and get them resolved. So that led me into just really being in the right place at the right time. Some international work came in. And from that, the lawyers I was working with had introduced me to another office in Germany and got some work from them. And I remember one time sitting beside a guy in a plane and we got chatting and he said, I said, where are you going? And he told me. He said, I've got a problem in a construction project. I nearly fell over myself to buy him a bottle of champagne. And that was it. He said to me after the journey, look, if you think you can help us, we'll give you a shout when we touch down. And that was another contact made.
Brilliant. But I think you're being a little bit humble here, Len, because like how does someone actually train to be, you know, a specialist in that field? Like that's not something that you particularly go to college for, you know, like what is the tool set for doing what you do? Like,
well, I think two things. I think, first of all, you've got to have a lot of experience of the construction industry. Yeah. And I think most of them problems I dealt with internationally there were common denominators right across the world with construction disputes. And secondly, I think you need to learn good communication skills, writing and speaking, confidence to back your own arguments, that sort of thing. It takes time, you know. So I see some young people rushing to be adjudicators at the age of 30. Good luck to them if they want to do that. But you've got to get a lot of mileage under your belt before you actually start to get into these heavyweight cases. I mean, it sounds glamorous, Gavin, but it's the same old airport, the same old hotel, the same old food. Desperate to get home and buy my wife some duty-free perfume, which was the main reason she wanted me to go abroad.
But it sounds like, with all due respect, and again, you're still playing it down. It sounds like it's a profession that has its own language. And I think you probably know what I mean by that. It sounds like it's not something that you pick up in a textbook. It's kind of like, I'd say you get a sense, or you get a behavioral kind of sense of what's going on in the room, even though what needs to be said isn't being said. Am I off track on that?
You've got to learn to take care of yourselves. I've had some absolutely hilarious experiences. One time I was involved in an arbitration in Delhi, and the room was full of the three tribunal members and a long table, lawyers, counsel up each side. And at 12:30, the door opened. They must have got their communications wrong, because a whole lot of people filed into the room with lunch, which was a mixture of different curries. So they're all sitting, having their lunch, chatting away, and obviously the guy that organised that got a real bollocking from the judges afterwards. But you couldn't help but smile at just the way it was.
Wasn't exactly the moment, in fairness, or the place for that. But in terms of construction, like, why did you pick construction at an early stage, or was it always in construction? Like, talk me through your journey of getting into the construction industry in the first place.
Well, I suppose it was in my blood, because my father was a very successful post-war housing architect. And so there, from a very early age, my father, my cousin, and two of my brothers were involved in the architectural practice. And from an early days, weekends were spent going around building sites. I know it sounds incredibly boring when other kids are out playing football, but that was just a way of life, and I get very much interested in the construction process. And then when I was leaving school, my father said, I think you should try and become an architect. So I went for an interview, and after about an hour, the professor of architecture at Glasgow University said to me, I don't think you have the flair that's necessary to become an architect.
Wow.
So I trotted back to my old man's office and told him, and he said, well, it doesn't surprise me, to be perfectly honest.
You're going to find your own way, Len.
He then picked up his phone and he dialed somebody, and he said, this conversation went like this: Willie, Sam Bunton here. I've got my boy with me. He'd like to become a quantity surveyor. Have you any vacancies? Now, Willie couldn't say no, because he was getting all the QS work from my father's practice. So Willie said, oh yeah, we can take him on. When would he like to start? My father said, he'll be up there in 10 minutes. And sure enough, 10 minutes later, I was in a QS office in Glasgow, and it was QS's gain and architect's loss.
Wow.
And I sat down, and this guy came over to me with about an 8-foot pile of day work sheets and said, check these mental arithmetic. We didn't have calculators in those days. And that was it, right in at the deep end. Apart from that, Gavin, it was a brilliant way to learn, because we were working during the day and at night school 4 nights a week and on a Saturday morning to learn the theoretical stuff. So by the time you got to the end of your apprenticeship, you were pretty well indoctrinated into the construction process and how things happened on sites.
It's great that you said that, because I see a lot of, even from my own business in safety, for example, these guys come out of university with a degree, and they've no hands-on experience, or they've no sense of what they're looking at or looking for.
Yeah,
and it's I think it's something that's really missing. I'm not saying across all professions, but the practicality and the hands-on and the time, putting in the time. It's not there. It seems to people coming out with PhDs and higher diplomas and degrees and whatever else, but then they can't, do simple logical stuff. They can't understand the culture of a construction site and what it is and how things come together. It's not something that they learn in college, I suppose.
Yeah. I think the other thing, I would always recommend any young person coming into the profession to have stint working with a construction organisation so that you see both sides of the fence. I've never actually been employed by a contractor, but over the last 30 years or so, I've worked for nearly 120, 130 different contractors on different assignments.
Wow.
And it's been extremely beneficial to see their perspective on the industry and the difficulties that they face.
Yeah.
I keep saying to younger people, a construction site is not a place where you operate for brain surgery. It's a construction site. And you're up to your wellies in mud and all the rest of it. And you've got to bear that in mind when the contractor identifies particular problems that they're coming up with and understand the difficulties that they face.
Well, like that leads me into, I've been born in here wanting to ask you this question. Is in terms of the risk profile of a contractor. So let's just take an example of, I've just won this major contract. It's a mixed development, it's high rise, it's hotels, it's retail. I'm ready to hit the ground running. I've done all the sort of the background stuff in terms of getting out the tenders and all that kind of stuff. And I'm ready to mobilize. Where do you fit in terms of the risk profile of managing the risk of that project? Do you think is it done at the procurement stage? Am I too far ahead, too far down the journey to start doing a risk profile of that job? Where should I start the journey if I'm Mr. Developer?
Let me answer to that question in this way. I spend a lot of time reviewing contracts that contractors are about to enter into. And there is no doubt that we have seen in the last 15 years a huge transfer of risk to the contracting businesses. More contractor design stuff, more design and build, more design development.
Yeah.
All that sort of stuff.
Fixed price, yeah.
Yeah, fixed price. So it's absolutely critical that contractors look at projects they're about to contract into and understand the risk profile they're taking on.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of stuff on LinkedIn. There's a bunch of guys that do the same sort of work as I do that keep highlighting ridiculous clauses that are drafted.
Yeah.
Some of them I looked at one the other day. It was completely unintelligible. I said to the lawyer that wrote it, well, I'm glad you understand it because nobody in the rest of the world will understand what you're trying to achieve with this.
Yeah, it's nearly a get-out clause for themselves that they've confused the whole paragraph in such a way that nobody can really understand it, but it looks good on paper.
Yeah, and I think it's futile because all that happens is if there's risk attached to it, the contractor's got to price that risk into the tender.
Yeah,
yeah.
So you're saying really that the language that's being used is not legible enough to be appropriate to determine the risk. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, I would say that. And I think there's two things emerging in my mind. A lot of the people we're working for, we can either try to factor these high-risk clauses out or water them down, or my clients will simply say, we're walking away from this job, thanks. Find some other mug, because we ain't pricing it. And I think SMEs in particular have got to stand up to that type of high-risk drafting and say, we're not doing it.
Yeah, I'm totally on your side, and I know we had a previous conversation about this, and I was buzzing for this podcast with yourself because I totally believe what you're doing is, the small to medium enterprise guy at the moment is in, a lot of these guys are in serious risk and they don't know it, or maybe they do know it and they're just not, putting the attention to it. And I know that we're going to talk about later on where you've got some tools and techniques that people can follow. But I suppose if we take a step back and go and look at the tier one companies, what stage do you think in the past did they turn around and say to themselves, right, we're not going to actually build anything anymore. We're just going to manage it. And then we're just going to bring out all these contractors and we're going to create a model whereby we don't do the work, but we manage the work.
Well, I think there's an emerging difficulty, Gavin. There's no doubt about it that there's a downturn in work. I mean, I spend a lot of time and I'm a consultant with some of the construction organizations and their members are seeing a downturn in work.
Yeah.
So therefore, in many instances, they've got to take on a contract because they actually need the work. And a client said to me the other day, I hear what you say. I understand the risk. Yeah. We'll worry about it in 12 months' time.
Wow.
My immediate necessity is to get turnover and as profitable a work as I can, and keep the business going. I was actually in discussion with somebody today who mentioned that in terms of making people redundant, that construction organisations are not going to be able to afford to do that because they don't have the money. So how they're going to survive?
Yeah.
They're having to make people redundant to cut their costs, but they can't afford to pay the redundancy payments. Now, that's a new one that has just come out.
I never thought about that one. Like that's heading into sort of, the high street retail model where pensions were being tapped into and all that kind of stuff. Like it's kind of, I suppose where I'm thinking as you're talking there, I'm like, large companies or contractors, they always measure how many jobs they've done, how much turnover they have, how many staff they have, how many hours they've clocked in. But they don't look at it in the reverse model and say, okay, how many tenders have we? How many do we not want? Even though there's a good chance of them getting it, because I think that's probably a better measure, is to say, how many contracts can we actually say we don't want?
I think you're right. I think they're besotted with turnover. And I mean, I get phone calls regularly from clients to say, we've just won a major job. Absolutely delighted. And you say, well, what sort of profit are you going to make out of it? Well, if we're lucky if we get 1 or 2%. What I was going to say, just rewinding there, I think SMEs in particular want to build long-term relationships with good clients and good tier one contractors. And I think the industry has got to recognise that without a supply chain, I think a main contractor won't have a business. So there is no point in kicking them all over the playground because they will just walk away. Now, I know that there are 2 or 3 of the big contractors in the UK treat their supply chain very, very well. There's one I'm aware of recently that decided they wouldn't have any retention with their subcontractors. So they don't have retentions. In another instance, any retention they were holding, they paid out to their subcontractors because they want to keep their supply chain. They need them.
Yeah. And I think from my experience, Len, and I think you can speak to this better than I can, but like these tier one companies need to probably understand that it's no longer an us and them situation within the model. Like these guys are an extension of their brand. Like they're connected to the tier one brand, whether they like it or not. And, something goes wrong, whether it's safety or whether it's quality or whatever else. It's not just the contractor's fault. It's the tier one company's fault. They have an obligation to bring these guys along, probably not sit behind, the glass offices, if you like, and sort of say, well, look, that's his problem. He's the specialist. He's the one who took on all the risk. Let him have it. Instead of educating the guy and saying, by the way, we know what you're making on this job, and you're not going to cut it. Like you're going to be 6 months or 8 months into this job, and you're going to be back to me going, I'm going to fold the business because I can't actually finish this job. Like, why did they not just say, look, I want to work with Gavin or I want to work with Len, and I'm actually going to educate this person to a point of where I can get him to the stage that we're not going to have a default problem where it's a fall off the cliff exercise after 12 months. Or are some of them just using it and saying, by the way, by the time 12 months gets going, this guy's going to be out of business and we've got 12 months work out of him.
Yeah.
Can you speak to any of that?
Can I make? There's 2 other issues I'd like to mention, if I might.
Yeah.
It's extremely worrying to see in the last 16 months the number of administrations in the industry. And also the numbers are beginning to be crystallised. I saw last week that somebody had gone down and they owed £65 million to their supply chain. There was another organisation announced, it just popped out an hour ago, 33 million and 11 million to the Inland Levy and all the rest of it. Yeah. These are absolutely horrific figures, and I think what people don't realise is that when a subcontractor is caught in that, and he's got a raft of subcontractors below him that he has contracted with, and he owes them money, it's like a domino effect.
Yeah.
So
and there's lies, there's real lies behind that. It's not numbers. It's not just numbers, Len. It's families, it's daughters, sons, it's legacy, it's generational. Like not just this generation, but the next generation. It would take down as well. How do we get to a stage where, if I'm a small builder, if I'm a plumbing or heating contractor, I've got 20 guys working for myself. Give me the Len Bunton, quick fire round of how I can protect myself from getting burnt.
Sell up and open a cafe in Marbella. Well, one of the things, I've been involved in an organization that started life at the beginning of the pandemic called the Construction Industry Coronavirus Forum. Okay. And that was brought together about 28 of the leading employer organizations in the industry, and particularly in Scotland. It's now known as the Construction Industry Collaborative Voice because we're over the pandemic and the industry has moved forward. Hopefully we're over it. And one of the things I spoke to a number of colleagues there was, as an adjudicator, I see where disputes arise.
Yeah.
So we put together this document called the Best Practice Guide, and we've identified about 14 different areas where we think if contractors implement the recommendations we've made, that they will be able to steer themselves out of trouble or avoid getting into trouble. And the next stage of that is to take that out to the industry and run a series of podcast and training workshops for construction organizations. Somebody phoned me today and asked me if I would put on a session on the BPG for their contracts managers and site managers. Now, it's not rocket science, Gavin. I mean, some of it is very straightforward. Just a simple matter of giving a notice under the contract. What does the contract say? That who should that notice be sent to? How should it be delivered? And they've got to look at the small print to see what the notice requirements are under the contract. If it says that you have to send it to Gavin in his luxury cabin on the top of Mount Everest, then that's what you've got to do. Yeah. And I've seen many times as an adjudicator, one of the defences that a respondent will make is the notice wasn't served in time or it was served to the wrong person.
Wow. And
progressively we've gone through these different issues that impact on a contractor on a day-by-day basis. Mm-hmm. Another one is hitting the dates on a contract for submission of payment applications. And I'm a great advocate of having a payment schedule in a contract that shows you when your application should be made and when the final date for payment is. The number of times that people miss these dates is absolutely incredible.
No way.
And what happens if they miss the dates? Their application won't be considered and it will go into the next month. Okay, and in the present state of the industry, that could absolutely cripple somebody.
Yeah, I've had experiences and I've seen, somebody didn't dot an I or whatever else. And next thing all of a sudden, their invoice gets put down to the bottom of the pile and nobody educates the contractor to say, by the way, that invoice is not going to go through. It's nearly like as if it's a win-win for the contractor to say, we found the problem. And then the invoice gets put down to Rose Ed. And because the guy is working so hard to try and get the job done, he's not focused on, is there a problem in the flow of the invoices and stuff like that? Like it's nearly like as if it's an entrapment model that some people use. And I think is there any sort of I don't know, with you're in the right mix. Is there any sort of push to stop this sort of entrapment culture? Where people know that there's deliberate. It seems like there's deliberate actions to try and catch people.
Well, these recommendations are in the BPG, Gavin. These should just become part and parcel of the way the business runs itself.
Yeah.
Every quantity surveyor, every contracts manager should understand what it is their obligations are and when they need to do things. I'll give you another simple example. As an adjudicator, I quite often have to look at a dispute over a payment application or a final account.
Yeah.
About 50% of the cases I've dealt with, the subcontractor is not justified as the payment application. He's either not demonstrated he's been instructed to do the work.
Yeah.
He's not demonstrated he's actually done the work.
Yeah.
He's not demonstrated how he's arrived at the prices, not quantified it, not substantiated the rates.
Yeah.
And the main contractor will simply say, "Well, we can't put any value in these because you
Yeah.
haven't substantiated it."
It's all hearsay. It's all hearsay and verbal discussions, and nothing was formal.
Yeah. What else do we put into it? Yes, the process of suspending the performance of your obligations if you're not paid by the final date for payment. More subcontractors I see are now threatening to do that. It comes with difficulties because you've got to shift your workforce onto another project. And then if you get paid in full, you've got to recommence the job that you've suspended. So you've got to bring your workforce back. So it's not easy, but it's a good clout to hit somebody with if they don't pay you on time.
Yeah, but like as you're talking, and I don't want to simplify things, but like there doesn't seem to be some sort of a benchmarking program as well to sort of categorize the small to medium enterprise builder contractor to such a point that, people look at them and say, look, you don't have the capacity to do this job for me. I know I'd love to work with you, but you actually don't fit into a category within our business that ticks all the boxes in terms of a scoring metric or some sort of a model to say, you're brilliant. Here's a blueprint of where I'd like to see it in 2 years' time. Come back to me in 2 years' time and we might give you a small project. I don't see that happening in the industry. And maybe you could talk to me. Maybe there is some sort of a model, but I don't see people. It's like as if it's fair game. Well, if your man decided he wanted to put in a tender and he's the lowest tender, I'm going to pick him.
Well, I mean, for the last probably 40 years, the industry has a major problem with the race to the bottom.
Yeah.
The public sector are guilty of this. The marker contractors tender 40% in quality, 60% in price. That's got to be reversed.
Yeah.
Public and private sector clients have got to recognise that contractors have got to make profits, as have the supply chain, because if they don't make profits, they'll be out of the game.
Yeah, there's a hidden secret veil, isn't there, in terms of the, they don't disclose. It's not open book. It's kind of like, there's a deal done at the top and everywhere else down after that is diluted to such a point as even the labour's diluted because it's not the labour belonging to that particular company, which is another probably problem in itself, is that you're not getting an inherent culture of people within the business because it's just being outsourced, randomly to different agencies.
One of our clients contacted me last week to say that he'd been helping a tier one contractor negotiate a job. They were specialised subcontractors and they were designing a particular element of the package. They were at it for about 6 months. And they got a phone call from the contractor to say, good news, we've been appointed in this contract. We want you to come in and talk to us. So he went to the meeting and they said, well, we've landed this job. You'll need to give us a further discount. And he said, I'm not giving you any more discount. I've bust my backside for the last 6 months to help you guys. So I'm not giving you a discount. As it turned out, they took him on. But, and I'm not blaming the contractors for that at all. Yeah. It's the system that is wrong.
The system is enabling them.
Until we change the mindset, we're going to get these situations continuing.
So Len, talk to me about, maybe some common themes that you see that are the pitfalls. Like, is it really down to the contracts in terms of what's in the contract, what's being signed off on? The fact, as you said, that some of the contract can be misleading or some of the language can be ambiguous or not transparent, or is there a common theme that you see where there's a failure, where the catastrophic failure is, that you kind of look back down through all your case studies and go, do you know what, there's a kind of a blueprint here where everybody messes up, or there's a point within the process where everybody messes up? Or is that just, am I being too simplistic with that question?
I think, to be perfectly honest, I think there's a whole load of things that need to be fixed in the industry.
Okay.
One starting point is the fees that designers get paid. Now, the public sector have decimated architects' fees for years now.
Okay.
By awarding professional appointments to the lowest bidder. And the outcome of that, and I see this as an adjudicator, is you get contracts going to tender that are not fully designed. They're full of CDP packages. They're full of provisional sums. And then the trouble starts as soon as the contractor gets onto site. And until the public and private sector realise, like everybody else, architects and engineers and quantity surveyors need a decent level of fee to be able to do their job properly. That, to me, is one of the most fundamental problems in the industry, and nobody has found a solution. And I don't know if we will ever find a solution given the economic state of this country at the present moment.
Yeah, it's frightening. It's frightening, Len. And look, there's no way of sugarcoating this. You're not coming here with the Grim Reaper stuff. Like we need to get you out there and get that voice heard in terms of the awareness amongst the industry, because there's so much toxic structures and contracts and relationships that people are going to lose their livelihood, they're going to lose their family, it's going to be absolutely catastrophic in terms of what the risk that people have taken on.
Mm-hmm. I was asked this question the other day: did I believe the construction industry in the UK will ever change? The answer to that is I don't think it will. It certainly won't in my lifetime, unless I manage to get my football match into extra time or something like that. I just can't see it. I just think the problems that the industry has got are absolutely enormous. We've got all sorts of groups of people talking about collaboration, report after report after report, and we're not really getting down to the nuts and bolts ways of finding solutions to the problem. And I'm sad to say this, I really am, that a lot of tremendous people give a tremendous amount of time to the industry to try to get it to change. I just don't think it is going to happen.
It's very fragmented, isn't it, as an industry? Like when you look at other industries, like there is a lot of sharing and knowledge, and don't get me wrong, there is a lot of partnerships, as you say, and there's a lot of different good groups that have come together for various reasons. But as you said, nobody's coming out with a solution of how the supply chain and the client come together in such a way that everybody can feel that it's a win-win. And there's no better place to be on when you're on a building site and everybody's making money, the client's happy, there's a great atmosphere. You actually get a good vibe for when you're on those projects, because you just know that, everybody's singing. There's a momentum on the site because there's enough on the table for everybody to be fed. And unfortunately, I don't know when the last time you were on site, but I haven't been on a site in a good while where I've got that real good feel, walking on the job that, everybody's dancing here. Everybody's really happy that they're making money. And, it seems to be that, it's nearly designed to be fragmented.
Yeah, I think there is one thing that's happening which I think is hugely positive, and that is the introduction of the conflict avoidance process into contracts. It's been successfully trialled on some major projects, and it's an early intervention process to stop issues on a site or on a project developing into construction disputes. I think that there's traction beginning to get on that. I'm currently vice chairman of the Conflict Avoidance Coalition in the UK, and we're definitely seeing an increasing level of interest in using that type of process. So you get in early, get the issue sorted out by a third-party intervention, and allow the design team and the contractor and the employer to get on with building the job. I'm sorry to say this, but having an adjudication in the middle of the contract, I think, is the death knell of relationships. They never recover from that.
Yeah, the trust is gone at that stage, isn't it? You're too far down the track, and what are you going to do? And now all of a sudden it's become personal because, you've got the two guys are going at each other's throats, and, the trust and the commitment is broken. Yeah. And as you say, you know, it's so important to get in at the very early stage to, you know, do your due diligence as an individual and as a company, so that both parties can be happy that the relationship can work or not work, you know, and I see, you know, this kind of language whereby, you know, if you stick with us, there's another job down the road, keep it going, and, you know, don't be worrying about, we'll get your money sorted, blah, blah, blah. And next thing, that invoice becomes the invoice of the next job rather than getting paid for that existing job. So, like, I know we could be here all day talking about all the little minutiae of all the details that are going wrong, but like, you know, we'll put a link in the description of this show of that great document that you've got that anyone could download and use and implement within their business today. And like, at least it'll give them some sort of a roadmap or a blueprint. Len.
Yeah, you sent me some random quick questions. Can I deal with these?
Yeah, so I'm going to ask you some really, really important questions that are going to, you know, give us a better insight into Len. Most inspirational book or film?
I've been thinking about that. Nothing really that jumps out, I must say.
Okay, and not even Braveheart, from considering the part of the
nothing comes out really that I can think about.
Okay, most inspirational business leader.
The most inspirational business leader is Ian McElwee. He's the CEO of the finishes and interiors sector. He's an absolutely incredible dino of a man. He and I have been working together for 6 years, and it's like having a twin brother. He is so energetic. His organisation are pathfinders in advising their members. He's a hugely respected individual in the industry, and he's an absolute joy of a guy to work with. If I was shipwrecked on a desert island and somebody come up out of the sea, I would hope it would be, well, first of all, my wife, and then Ian McElwee.
Well, good, nice call. Good catch, Len.
She's listening to this, I had to say that.
And a great shout for that man. Retire early or keep going? Well, look, here, come on. This is out of anyone to answer that question, you're the man to answer that question.
I'd like to be the first construction industry person to get a 100th birthday card from the king.
I love it. Listen, it's a credit to you, Len, and I'm not going to disclose your age, but let's just say, yeah, you're an amazing person with amazing energy. So fair play. Best construction vehicle or piece of plant you purchased? I've
not purchased either.
You've not purchased either. That's okay.
And I haven't stolen anything off a site.
That's owned by somebody else. Best place to relax or go on holiday to have some downtime?
We go to a village in the northeast of Scotland called Brora, Brora. It's got an absolutely wonderful golf course along that stretch of Scotland. I'm a great golf fan, absolutely useless at the game, but it's get away from it all. And we're going there in June, go there twice a year. I just love it.
Fabulous. Your morning routine?
Morning routine, make a cup of tea for the missus.
Love it.
Come into this office, switch on, and I'm not kidding you, all hell breaks loose for the rest of the day. I do not know what will be coming, at what time, who will be on the phone, and it's just non-stop. And then I collapse about 7 o'clock, a glass of red wine.
The Rhino relaxes, huh? Your pet hates. So what's your pet hates? Yeah,
people who don't listen to me. I don't mean to sound arrogant, but when somebody pays you a lot of money to give you advice, they've got to sit and listen and digest it and debate it.
It sounds like for you to say that, it sounds like some people don't want to listen. They just put the blinkers on and go, look, I'll figure it out, but because they know better. Or is it arrogance?
Well, sometimes you've had to say to somebody, you've been running this business and it's in a mess. And you're going to have to stand back and look at why that's happening. And, we will analyze if you have some responsibility in that. And maybe you've made bad decisions. We've all made bad decisions during your career. I certainly have. But looking objectively at this, maybe you're not the right man to be steering this business out of trouble at the moment.
Yeah. Go
away and think about that, and let's discuss a way forward.
You need to get out of your own way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's wow. In fact, if we were to take anything from that podcast, that last statement that you just made is probably as important as everything else.
Yeah.
Something random about you that nobody would guess, Len. Come on. Apart from Rhino, obviously.
Well, I asked my wife that question. She said, well, you better say that you're becoming deaf. And I'm an expert at emptying our dishwasher.
Wow, I love it. So is there a model in terms of people should follow for the dishwasher removal?
40 years experience and never broken a glass, Gavin.
Do you start at the top with the cutlery and then go into the middle shelf? Or do you start at the bottom and work your way up? Like, I'm interested to know what your mind map is on that one. Are you top down or are you bottom up?
Oh, depends how much I've had to drink.
Len, on that note, you're an absolute gentleman. Where can we find you? Where is Len on social media? Where's your website? How can people get in touch with you? You're going to get a lot of people that are going to be wanting to talk to you. So tell them where we can find you.
Well, my website is out of date, but the email address is len@buntonconsulting.co.uk.
Okay, we'll put that in the show notes as well for the listeners.
So I'm switching this computer on at 6 o'clock tomorrow morning. I expect to have 500 new clients.
I think there should be more Lens. Have you thought about maybe doing some training and training people up and having more people educated to do what you're doing?
Yeah, join the army of change.
Yeah. Okay, Len. Listen, thanks very much. I really appreciate it. And look, we wish you the best. And thanks for everything that you're doing in the construction industry. It's much, much needed. And for anybody that's listening, take the risk off the table. Don't be getting yourself into situations that you can't get out of. Follow the advice of people like Len. They're there for the good of your health and the health of your family and your business. And don't get caught up in a risky situation you can't get out of.
Remember, just ask for the Rhino. I'll be there.
Ask for the Rhino.
Thanks, Gavin. It's been absolutely brilliant. A pleasure meeting you.
Yeah, no, pleasure's all mine, believe me.